As a storyteller, you're looking for a gap in the record. You're looking for a story that should have been told in modern films and hasn't been. And I think Dunkirk's one of the greatest stories in human history, so to me, there's a tremendous opportunity there. As far as the specifics of how I wanted to go about it, or what it meant to me, I would point to a trip that Emma, the producer of the film, and my wife, and myself made with a friend of ours who had a small sailboat, and he wanted to make the crossing. This is about 20 years ago to Dunkirk, at about the same time of the year that the evacuation had taken place. And with this superficial knowledge of the story that we had, we quite frivolously, really, tried to make the crossing. And
this is insane!
It was a very, very difficult experience. It took much longer than it should have. It took us about 19 hours. The channel was extremely rough, and it felt dangerous. It really was an unpleasant and difficult experience. And that was without people dropping bombs on us. You know, we weren't heading into a war zone. It's so your respect and your fascination with the people who actually got on those boats in 1940, knowing they were heading into that war zone, it's sort of unthinkably brave. And I think that's where the seeds of the idea of putting the audience on that boat, for me, came from. I only wrote a 76-page script because I always knew the film had to be lean and stripped down. You can only sustain that for so long. We wanted the language of suspense, which is the most visual of cinematic languages. So we were looking to the silent era. We were looking to the great suspense masters like Hitchcock and Clouseau and their visual storytelling. We screened a print of Wages of Fear for the crew. A lot of the key members completely got what it was on about, because the thing about Wages of Fear is it's all about physical process, like a Bresson film as well. It's all about, you know, these spinning truck tires and the creaking wood structure that's on. Is it going to give way? Is it not? And so you start to get this thing of you can create empathy for characters in film. Hitchcock understood this better than anyone, just by virtue of the physical situation. So you don't, you know, my feeling was, okay, you don't need characters who come on screen and through dialogue make the case for why you should care about them because of where they've come from or who they left at home or whatever. Just dive into, can they carry this guy on a stretcher across a plank without falling over? Like that. That's what you get from Clouseau and from Hitchcock, I think. I planned the structure very carefully, like when I wrote Memento, before I wrote the script. A lot of diagrams, a lot of careful planning about how I was then going to write the script. And so the structure I settled on is one that it's based on a musical structure called the shepherd tone, which is a musical illusion whereby you can keep climbing up the scale. It's something I'd used in my scores, like the David Julian score for The Prestige was the first time we experimented with it. So you're continually going up the scale, but you never seem to go out of reach, if you like. And I wanted to try and apply that to screenwriting, to a narrative, and say, okay, with this story, can you braid together the three storylines in such a way that you create the idea of a continuing rise in intensity narratively? And sustaining that is the challenge of the structure. But the structure came about as a result of saying, I want to tell this in a very subjective way, in a very human scale way. I only want to see really what the characters are seeing who are involved. But for people who don't know the story particularly, you want to build up that larger picture. So how do you do that without cutting to politicians or generals in rooms with maps and pushing symbols around and stuff? And the way I chose to do that was to divide it into these multiple points of view that would interact, show you the same event from different points of view, and so forth. And the timescales come about as a result of wanting to be able to cross-cut these points of view and reflect the different relative times in which they're taking place, so that that week of intense stress and intense boredom mixed together, cross-cutting with this 1 hour that a Spitfire pilot had above Dunkirk, that hour stretching to this massive experience that they're going through. That was really the idea. But you then have to be the audience for the film. You've got to start at page one, give yourself a coherent experience. It was very important to me in taking on this historical reality that we not do the usual Hollywood thing of casting 30-year-olds as 19-year-olds. It's an important thing, I think, to have in the film. The way we still fight wars, we send our children to fight these wars, as Mark's character says. We send 18, 19, 20-year-olds off to fight, and so we wanted to find people of that age, and so we were looking at open casting calls, people who didn't have agents yet, people in drama school. I mean, Tom Glynn-Carney, who plays Mark Rylance's son, dropped out of drama school to come and do the film. I gather they let him graduate based on the film, which is good.
Hope so.
But, and Fionn Whitehead, who plays what I consider the lead of the ensemble, had really done nothing, no film work before. And that was very important to us, to have these fresh faces. And really, we wanted faces that when the film starts, there's no expectation that this guy is going to take on the whole German army or win the day or whatever. You're just looking at this kid thinking, I don't want him to get killed. I want him to be okay. And that was, I got to meet with some veterans while I was writing the script, and some of their experiences wound up incorporated into the film. In particular, the moment where you see the soldier take his gear off and just try and swim out, either killing himself or trying to swim to a boat or swim all the way across the channel. That's a story that I was told by a veteran named Vic Viner, who has since passed on. These guys were not face to face with the enemy. The guys on the beach, the guys in the perimeter, eventually, but even then, it's not like it is usually in the movies. There's this sense of you are hearing and feeling and seeing the effect of their weaponry, and there's a terrifying sense of them getting closer and closer, but you're not able to see them, and that is more, for me, more tense, more suspenseful. And I think once I decided that I never wanted to see them, I started to feel like, why talk about them? Why refer to them, their nationality, whatever? It's sort of irrelevant. This to me is a survival story, and I want it to be as universal as possible. And so the specifics of the cultures involved, the film doesn't really have the ability to encompass that. We're not dealing with that. We're just trying to deal with it from this very, very human perspective of survival in the moment. Well, we wanted to be true to this notion of subjectivity. So we wanted to find a way to put the camera in the cockpit and keep it there, not jump to the sort of German point of view, but stay, within the world of the pilot. We were able to source the real plane. So we had real Spitfires, we had a real Messerschmitt, we had a real bomber. We needed to find ways to get this enormous camera into the cockpit. And so Hoyte van Hoytema, my director of photography, has an excellent engineering brain. He started working with IMAX and with Panavision to develop different lenses. And so an example of one of Hoyte's ideas is, you can't fit the camera in this way. What if you turn it vertically, mount it behind the seat, and create a lens that has a right angle? So then you can put the lens where the head of the pilot would be. And it's a brilliant solution, and it worked very well. The other thing that when we looked at all of the different dogfights that have been done in films, the thing that lets all of them down are the shots of the actors. In one way or another, they're artificial because they're green screen in more modern films, or to do with exposure balance, things like that. My stunt coordinator, who is also a passionate student of aviation, Tom Struthers, he came up with the idea of buying a Soviet-era Romanian plane called a Yak. It's about the same size and shape of the Spitfire, but we could buy it, own it, change it to look like a Spitfire, and then it has two cockpits. So the idea was we could mount the camera on the wing of the plane or the fuselage of the plane. A real pilot could fly from the back, and the actor could be in the front. And that way we could put them in formation with the other planes and really have them go through the action for real and get shots in camera like that. IMAX film is the highest resolution imaging format that's ever been devised. It was actually invented a year before I was born. It's been with us a long time, but it had never been used in Hollywood films until we did On the Dark Knight. I had seen IMAX films, IMAX presentations in museums, and become fascinated with the format as a kid, and used the fact that I was doing a sequel to a film to negotiate with the studio to say, hey, let me try using these cameras. The cameras are huge and unwieldy and very noisy, but the negative area is 3 times the size of regular 65mm. So the film you've just seen is shot 70% on IMAX and then the remaining 30%, which is most of the dialogue scenes where we needed to record sound, because IMAX cameras are very noisy. So we used Panavision 65mm 5-perf film, which is what Lawrence of Arabia was shot on, or Hateful Eight. And this print is made totally photochemically and optically, so there's no digitization of the IMAX negative. It was all done on an optical printer, a photochem in Los Angeles, and we're going out with about 125 of these 70mm prints. I've spent a lot of time over the last few years really defending film, celluloid film, and really trying to articulate coherent arguments for why it's so important to me and to other filmmakers who love it. Essentially, on a technical level, it comes down to it's a better analogy for the way the eye sees than video formats. So it has analog color. There's no banding of the color. It's not subject to any particular bit depth, like 10-bit or 12-bit color. It's analog color. The resolution's very, very high. I mean, an IMAX film frame, it doesn't have an equivalent digital resolution because it's an analog format with a random grain structure, but it would be about 18K minimum or something. So it's just it's a whole different order of magnitude what you can achieve in terms of how the eye sees. And so if you're making a film where you want the tone of the film to be such that you're sort of seeing the world the way you see it, not a heightened reality, film's the best way to do that. And I think one of the reasons it's been under such threat in the last 10 years particularly, is that a lot of what's driving the box office with the studios are films that don't require that naturalism. They tend to have a very predominantly CG sort of look. They tend to be patterned. I mean, animation, CG animation has been a huge factor in the box office in the last 10 years. And so those things, they don't miss out. But when you want to make a film that looks like the world around us, films are the best tool for doing it. A film goer and as a film lover myself of large-scale entertainment, I'm very excited to see something new and different, but that will tick whatever those boxes need to be to qualify something for sort of entertainment, if you like, in the summer. Entertainment's a funny word to use in relation to a real-life event, but at the same time, cinema is about all different forms of entertainment, and the experience, the visceral experience, the sort of subjective view of an event that you don't want to go experience in real life, God forbid, but that you can get some sense of. That's a very important part of what large-scale filmmaking can do. What I needed from Hans was tracks that, right as we got in the edit suite, we would lay out a tempo map and start fusing picture in sound effects, music, and pick one very unified rhythmic structure. From a recording I made of a watch that I owned that I had a particularly insistent ticking, and I sent it to Hans along with his team and said, can you start building rhythmic tracks out of this? Because the script was written according to certain musical principles to do with approaches to music that can give you a sense of continuing momentum. I mean, sometimes, it's like with the bomb sound or something, you go, okay, that's something I put into movies and that wasn't there before or whatever. You go, but some little tool that somebody else can then use, or you can sort of advance it. But if you look at where films are now, and you just compare the technical evolution of them, I mean, there's just no stopping them. They just go and they go and they go. And I'm not, because I'm a defender of celluloid, it's not because I'm against technological development in film. It's because that I know, and when you go to see the IMAX film print of this film, you start to understand, we just haven't mined what that incredible medium can do. And I just want to start doing that, Well, I think the only advice I've ever really been able to offer people starting out is sort of stick to your guns. There is something distinctive that you want to get across. And generally, that's the thing that is most challenged by the people you're trying to convince to let you do it. And I think the only thing to do is really, really stick to your guns and try and achieve something different, something unique, personal to your voice. If you let people, smooth off the rough edges too much, there won't be anything that you're bringing to the table, and that's what's important with your first work in particular.
Did it ever feel like this is going to be complicated for the audience, or did you have any concerns about it being, a real a difficult thing for an audience to grasp, or did it feel that it was something that people could grasp?
Well, it's like, fuck it.